Paramount, California University in Rancho Palos Verdes. But he has been a victim of the wildfires, and PGE just told him yesterday they're going to be shutting off the power again today with very little notice. And he had said that he had a generator, and he was emailing me this morning, but that is maybe not happening. So we've been waiting for him for about 11 or 20 minutes now. And if he jumps in, then we'll be very excited. I did have a pre-interview with him, Danny. And Danny, of course, is a TV host, actress, writer, producer. Super excited to have her. My producer's calling me right now. Hold on. Giving us an update. Hi, we've started the live stream. What is our update on Professor Earle? I've literally emailed him again and again and again. Okay, I'll email him. Okay, bye.
The link, the Zoom link.
She says he didn't have the link. All right, we're gonna try this again, guys. Literally sending him the link that we are on currently. So I don't know how it could change. He did this last time, actually. We had, he did this last time, actually, when we had a Zoom. He had trouble getting to the link. Technology these days is very difficult.
We're all learning.
We're doing the best I can.
Yeah.
We did have a really interesting pre-interview with him, Danny, my sister and I, who works as a producer on the show. And he was really, really big on how we need to be preventing wildfires as opposed to just tackling them once they begin. Like, this is something that we know is coming. And he talked to me about some of the ways that we can prevent it. And so I'm hoping he can get into that a little bit more in detail. And then also he talked to me about how these wildfires and how these natural disasters are sort of related to the pandemic, and how COVID is related to wildfires and related to other natural disasters. And so I'm hoping that he can go into depth a little bit more about that as well. And it's, he sent us a lot. Did you get a chance to read? Whenever you work with a professor, don't ask him for reading materials, because they'll just come flooding in. They've come flooding in. And so he's given us a lot of different articles, and, you know, he's a very progressive guy, but at the same time, you know, he's really objective about the information that he's getting. So even though he's progressive, he doesn't always go with the progressive viewpoint. He goes with what's accurate and what's right. And, you know, there's always money at play and all of these different things. So he gives us pretty good insight about what the truth is on how we can, you know, combat these wildfires. I'm going to send him the link again.
And the thing about this wildfires is, like, up until recently this year, when the president spoke about it, I don't really think that many people have heard the discourse around, like, how do we handle this? Mm-hmm. How do, like, what, I mean, I didn't even know. One actually. Second.
Hello? He was emailing me back and forth. What do you mean he's not getting the emails? I just emailed him the same email. I responded to his email.
Refresh.
Okay, bye. He's saying that he's not getting the emails, but that's impossible because I'm responding to the email that he sent me. So I don't know how he's not getting it. Copy invitation. I'll try it again. Now she wants it texted to her. Not possible. And she has the link anyway. So we may have to cancel this episode of Contextualize This due to tech issues. I don't know what the issue is. I'm trying my best, but unfortunately.
Also, our professor's running on a generator because he is
running on a generator. He is.
He's a man of his studies. He's living the life.
So sorry, I'm trying to do this all at once. And I said I'd be, yeah.
I went to a restaurant yesterday, and while we were eating, they closed down.
What?
Yes, they were like, So we're closed now. You're going to have to go. We're like, what?
Oh, maybe they came and shut them down because of health code or something.
No, there was like a technical difficulty literally while we were in the restaurant. And it was so, I guess, was so bad that they had to like excuse everyone out of the restaurant. Everyone left. It was so weird. So I'm just saying, things happen even when you go to a restaurant where that's an extreme live experience.
I'm disappointed because I was really excited to talk about this.
Yeah.
Some of my questions were the environmentalist tactic of promoting firefighting over prevention. There's an argument that this is like the core issue of why, these wildfires are really this ongoing big issue. And, are the forests pristine? Do we need to just protect the forests? And, should we be working to preserve them without any sort of disruption, without anything like this? And Professor Earle is actually arguing that no, these forests have already been logged, they've already been disrupted, and they do need to be maintained to prevent the spread. They've actually exacerbated it. And in fact, sometimes this over logging that we've seen causes these fires to burn stronger and hotter, as opposed if the forests had been pristine. So now that we've already, with the forests, we got to now think about how we can prevent some of this stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I had asked him, so are you saying, is Donald Trump right? Was he accurate? Like, we need to rake the forests? Because pretty much that is the case. You know what I mean? Like, you got to go in there, clear the brush. You got to go in there and trim the trees, cut down trees, do all these things. But it's a very expensive process. You know what I mean? I don't know if you've ever been involved with anybody that needed to fell a tree, but it can be upwards of $7,000, $8,000, $9,000, depending on how big these trees are. And if you're living in a rural area and you have your own land, can you afford $1,200 to have some tree guys come out and cut a few trees down? Probably not.
If you have a dozen or more, right? Which is really where the problem would come into play. And it's funny because I think we know that the indigenous people that lived on the land here in California, they had their own practices. And part of that was actually doing some of the burning of the brush and things like that. So when Donald Trump said that, I was, the guy is known for a lot of partial truths, but that was definitely one of those things that I was like, well, from what my novice understanding of what's going on, like, he appears to be right. So I was really looking forward to chatting with him to really sort that through, especially also finding out that 85% of most forest fires are man-made. And especially like this year with the gender reveal and
how did that even happen?
And people just carelessly throwing away their cigarettes, like things like that always happen. Yeah. Campfires that go out of control. There's a lot of also variables with what humans are doing and what nature is doing, and sometimes those are a bad mix. When they get
it's a bad mix for sure, but it's also it's one of the things that Professor Earle was going to talk about is environmental racism. Oh, he's here. He made it. I knew he had the email. Don't say anything. Shh. Let's see if he comes in. So yeah, he was going to talk about environmental racism, which is, important, of course. But how these wildfires affect different people disproportionately, and who has more money, who doesn't, et cetera, et cetera. Let's see if we'll get him to start his video. And I've noticed that in a lot of different, obviously we know the water in Flint, Michigan, it's affecting the poor communities more than, the more wealthy communities. And the same thing with wildfires, who is getting, Professor Earle, can you hear us? Not yet, still with technical issues. But who's getting the assistance? You know what I mean? Who gets the help? Who goes and runs and how? And typically, the most vulnerable people, undocumented people who are in those areas being victims of wildfires as well, they're not getting any assistance at all. And, not to say that people who have, $800,000 houses or $1 million houses shouldn't get assistance, of course. I mean, everybody's like losing their lives and their livelihood. Professor Earle, can you hear us? He's on. Let's see. Oh, we lost him. He is having technical issues. Professor Earle does live up Northern California, and he has been evacuated. He's been told to evacuate. He's dealt with a lot of things in the last. We actually were supposed to do this episode a few weeks ago, and it got canceled because he was evacuated. And then today, PG&E just yesterday said that he was going to get cut off for his electricity. So that's another issue. So maybe that's why he's not logging on. But you know, when you're dealing with environmental racism, when we see what's going on, you know, these communities that live by the freeways, and they're getting asthma, and they're getting all these other things. We have the Flint, Michigan issues. Here he comes again. Good. I hope we can get him this time.
All right.
There he is.
Hey,
Hi, Professor
there
Earle. I'm so glad you can make it. We asked you to turn on your camera if you'd like, but if you want to just remain incognito, we're okay with that too.
My camera is on. You were the ones without the camera.
Really?
Oh,
there you are.
Yes.
There he is.
Mm-hmm.
Professor Earle, this is Danielle Jones Wesley. I don't know why I've been saying Wesley Jones, Danny. Sorry about that. And this is Professor Earle. Thank you so much for joining us. I know you're struggling up there. I don't know if you're still on generator power. You yourself have been a victim of the wildfire disasters.
No, we're on normal.
Okay, good. Now,
There
Professor
you go.
Earle.
Right. The only thing is I have some.
You're cutting up a little bit. Go ahead again.
Yeah, I was going to make my connection's a little unstable.
Okay.
One thing that be on the internet that I'm going to need to fix. So hang on, just one second.
Okay. We'll
Okay,
hold
no
on for
worries.
that. I'll do his introduction while he's doing that. Professor Earle's a cultural anthropologist. He's a professor of economics and global studies at Marymount California University in Rancho Palos Verdes. He has nearly 40 years experience in teaching. He has a range of insights from global development, resilient cultures in border regions like Mexico, Guatemala, and even in the continent of Africa. He's worked with communities in regards to environmental racism and blocking fracking and the effects of fracking. And then now his most recent work studies wildfires, vulnerable communities, both rich and poor, and how they are managing risk and preparing in the face of potential obliteration with nowhere else to go. That was your intro, Professor Earle, as you missed
Yep.
it.
Thank you.
Did I get
Hopefully
it right?
We're in better. Yes, that was very good. I'm also a professor of economics. I don't know whether you got that part.
I did add that in there. Yeah. He
Good,
does it
good.
all, ladies
It's
and
good.
gentlemen.
He's the money guy.
Right. I follow the money. That is
And that's
part
so
of my
important.
interest.
Yeah, that's so
is
important when we're
very
talking
important.
about wildfires, right?
Yes, because this is an economic issue as well as an environmental issue. And it's the confluence of these two things that tends to determine, what happens when wildfires, as they call them, we'll call them forest fires, were only in more remote areas. It was not considered to be a kind of state policy issue that we have to revisit. And then we started getting these very different kinds of fires in the South that are more scrubland fires and chaparral fires and lands with a lot of grasses in them. And these threatened housing developments where the state of California has been allowing the building of developments in what they call the interface with the wildlands. That is to say, the lands where, in quotes, nature, that is to say, unimproved land, encounters large numbers of residents.
Yeah.
And, I can say right off, although I really don't want to talk about the grasslands, I want to talk about the forest. But I can say right now, there are plans on the planning board right now that have not yet been built that I can tell you will burn down because considered the fire resistance elements in development. They're not putting the houses far enough apart. They're not building sprinkler systems that would add $10,000 or $20,000 to a residential house. They're not pre-preparing them. And this whole chat here is prefaced by Benjamin Franklin, who said an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And unfortunately, in the fire issue, because fires, once they're going and big, are very dramatic and draw a lot of funding.
Yeah.
And in fact, draw funding away from other things like prevention. It's prevention that is the key to dealing with fires. And that's going to be a different thing when we're talking about grass fires, forest fires.
Right. I asked you this before,
Yeah.
Professor Earle. So are you saying that Donald Trump was right, that we need to rake the forests?
Well, in part, I mean, it's very easy for Trump to point to raking the forests and not acknowledge that the vast majority of the forests in California are owned by the federal government. And the Forest Service, which has been beggared since the time of Ronald Reagan, it shouldn't be in the Department of Agriculture. It's in the Department of the Interior, where all these forests are. But, and now increasingly the poor Forest Service has to go chasing around lost hikers and try to defend one person's house in the middle of a forest, huge forest, which is very expensive and takes money away from the prevention stuff, which, by the way, is not very sexy. Right?
What does it entail, and how much would that cost? What is the prevention?
Well, it starts with doing what the Native Americans have been doing for the last 100,000 or 80,000 years, probably at least 10. And that is small controlled burns outside of fire season. Because this is what, we don't know what the natural state of California was, but because when the first settlers got here, it had already been occupied and managed for many hundreds of years by people who intimately knew the environment and did different kinds of fires and other kinds of management practices depending on where they were and what amongst 100 different things that they were using these fires for. They did. Now, most people realize at this juncture that 100 years of state and federal fire suppression was perhaps not a really good idea. But you can see why it was, because it was driven by politics, not by environmental management. And it's very easy to get money to fight a fire once the fire is lit.
Yeah.
It's really hard to get money to fight a fire when it has not yet started.
Yeah. That's where the old saying, they lit a fire under him, get him to do the work.
And I have a question. What is like the practical way that we could allocate resources to do
prevention?
To do prevention.
Well, first of all, to have some system whereby people can acquire money or the equivalent and in work value to be able to clean up their own houses. Yeah, the burden of cleaning up excessive numbers of trees, of dead wood on the ground, of leaves, of other burnable, what they call fuel, vegetal fuel, the burden of that is completely on the homeowner, which is utterly unfair because it isn't the homeowner that put this situation together.
Right.
It was 100 years of negligent forest management and failure to pay attention to the original managers, who in a few places are still doing this, that is to say the native population, and drawing up in every area of California an ideal forest management design. We've got the academics to do it here at Davis and other places, at Berkeley and other places, to do that, to provide the homeowner with what is the ideal change in their relationship to nature that would optimize their chances of survival, both in terms of managing the forest around them and improving the ability of their house to withstand fire, and then subsidizing their ability to pay for that.
Right. That's because it's expensive. We were talking, Danny.
Expensive. One tree one large oak tree that's hovering above my double wide right now is going to cost me, if I want to take it all down, about $1,200. If I want to take just the branch that's over the trailer, it's going to be about $800.
Wow.
So a 1 acre plot, we're talking $10,000 to $20,000, especially because it's not done in a quantitative way. It's, you have to bring all the equipment out and the personnel and all of that for one case, and then the next neighbor a few months later would do the same. So there's a huge amount of waste in doing one by one as people are able to do it.
Instead of just having a team come out, we're coming out, we're trimming trees, blah, blah, blah. Your tax money has already paid for this, perhaps. How would you suggest it gets paid for, this prevention and clearing these trees on private property? We might have lost him. He's got a little bit, he's still here, but he's got a little bit of a wonky system.
Right. Oh,
there
don't get me started about PG&E. PG&E.
We're having a little interference on your side, Professor Earle. If you can hear us still, start. Maybe if you jump back on to go ahead and start again.
Professor Earle.
You know, he is up there in we lost him, but he's, you know, he has a real problem with PG&E because, you know, PG&E was responsible for that fire last year. They had a huge lawsuit. And then now it's just a real confluence of like it's like the perpetrator is the victim. You know what I mean? They like to act like, oh, when they haven't been. There you are. We lost you again, but you're back.
Yeah. It is, as you say, that it is a kind of blaming the victim.
Yeah.
You there?
Yeah, I'm here. We can hear you. We lost your video, but we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, well,
that's okay. We can get your sound. Danny's pretty enough to cover the the margins. You know, I know PG&E had not updated their equipment. They had not been on top of some of these measures that would have maybe prevented that big fire last year, or was it 2 years ago? I don't recall. But yet here they are.
In the end of the year,
asking for money, asking for help, and then they had to pay all of these homeowners that lost their homes, and now they're struggling. It just seems to be this endless cycle, and these wildfires are a cycle. You know, we see them come, we see them go. We know they're coming, and you know, I talked to Professor Earle before this interview, and we talked about how they're using inmates to fight fires, and he suggested why not use the inmates to prevent fires. Bring the inmates to come out and trim these trees. There's a lot of people in the area that would be willing to do that work. You know, there was a lot of progressive legislation back in New Deal era that, you know, alphabet soup, where they had all of these different, you know, organizations, the California Conservation Corps, et cetera, et cetera. If there were to be an organization like that to go ahead and utilizing federal funds to mobilize workers in that area to then prevent some of these fires by taking these trees down, by clearing the brush, by clearing the area, both in public and private lands, because you know the fire doesn't care where the boundary is.
It doesn't.
Exactly.
And another like idea, even for maybe some of these like rich communities, like what we saw like up the coast in California, is like potentially even doing like a local version of that. These people are paying $44,000 a month for their homes. I'm pretty sure they can put some into a pot to prevent some fires, you know? I mean, realistically, that would be another
resources
option.
Away from poor. Yeah, we shouldn't be taking resources away from a poor part of California in order to put funds in Malibu.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
The people in Malibu have the resources to defend themselves, and they've been having some very good private firefighting groups out there doing that. They should do.
So it's actually proof that it is possible to prevent fires. It's proof that we can work to prevent people's home from getting engulfed in flames and their livelihoods being ruined. We're seeing that. So this really begs a question on how this is related to environmental racism. because there are a lot of people up in these areas who are living very modest lives and, living in rural communities where they don't have the resources that the wealthy in Malibu do. I think we lost Professor Earle again. But as you can see, he has a wealth of knowledge about this. And I did want to talk to him about logging and how the logging industry has exacerbated this issue of wildfires and the concept. Are you back, Dr. Earle?
Yes, I am.
Okay. I want to thank you so much.
Fun.
Thank you so much for bearing with us. I know the technology has been an issue this morning, but I wondered if you could talk a little bit about how logging has affected the forests and how it's exacerbated the issue of wildfires.
Well, the problem of logging is not the removal of the forest to be removed and replaced by younger trees. The problem is that when they remove logs, they often clear cut those logs. That is to say, just taking out everything. And so, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, we're here.
So
as
a result, as a result of all of this, of the clear cutting, as it's called, when the forest regrew again, and right out here, the forest right here, this happened to, when the forest regrew, it grew with the pioneer plants taking over much of it, like lodgepole pines, or it depends on where, but fast growing plants came in and created almost a monocrop, almost a highly reduced biodiversity, and also made it vulnerable to disease, like the bark beetle, because if all the trees are the same and they're all a soft tree, they're all susceptible. So the thing that needs to be understood is by the public, environmentalists, and everyone else is, yes, there are pristine forests in California. Most of them we don't own as Californians. Most of it is owned and poorly managed because of lack of funds by the federal government. But we should be focusing, California should be focusing on the areas of its responsibility and doing these preventive measures, because most of the areas that California has are not pristine areas. They're areas that have previously been logged. They're already out of balance with nature. And we really need to think of them not as natural, but as places for management, land management. Areas that need to be sort of like your yard, your garden. We need to be proactively, I hate to say redesigning the forest, but it's redesigning it.
Or rehabilitating it?
Well, rehabilitating suggests going back to how it was. We also have to take into account climate change, which wasn't there before. So that even when we rethink forests, they're going to have to be designed to be more resilient. Right?
I like that term of redesigning forests. Would that include then incorporating new vegetation, like you mentioned?
Potentially.
Okay.
Potentially, and kinds of vegetation and fire breaks that may not be native plants in every case, although there are plenty of native plants that can do this, that don't burn very readily, that you make spaces within the forest so that a fire doesn't jump from one place to another. What is the most difficult aspect of climate change is not the heat, even though the heat is bad, it's the wind.
Yeah, especially in Southern California.
Yeah, well, Northern California too. We have these
too.
That can get up 80, 90 miles an hour. In a situation like that, if you don't have periodic breaks, there's just nothing you can do. As soon as things get caught on fire. I mean, the Paradise fire, when Paradise is a half an hour from me as the crow flies, they went 7 miles in less than an hour.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
And now 7 miles an hour may not sound fast, but for a forest fire,
huge, yeah.
Frighteningly fast. And we haven't seen the fastest yet. We haven't seen the worst fires yet. We're just beginning to get into this. So I hate to say this, but it's a luxury to think we're going to get this land back to how it once used to be, all completely in balance with nature. We're going to have to think about redesigning it in detail.
Yeah, down to the type of plants. We lost you a little again, Dr. Earle. Really fascinating stuff. I never heard the concept of redesigning a forest before. I think, as conservationists, and I know, Danny, you're really into, protecting the planet and being a conservationist and focusing on ecology. And we always think we want to bring it back to nature. We want to bring it back to how it was. And here, Professor Earle is giving us a whole new insight that is not the solution. We cannot just put it back how it was. That will actually make things worse because we're dealing with new variables. And there's a lot of synergy in that, climate change, et cetera. I mean, is this what you expected to hear from him?
And it's really funny. Yeah, actually, to an extent, yes, because it almost feels like we aren't supposed to be living in these areas. And because we're trying to create this unnatural reality of like having a home in a place that, naturally is a little bit more chaotic in terms of like its climate, in terms of like the natural elements that are in that space, like we're gonna have to redesign it. It actually makes complete sense.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't even know that the wind was getting exacerbated by global warming. I mean, do you understand that scientific dynamic? I mean, how does that work? I understand maybe the ozone layer is changing. The planet's getting hotter, and I'm guessing that affects weather across the board, including the wind.
Yeah, I mean, we see right now through climate change incredible winds coming through, like the increasing of tornadoes and hurricanes and things like that. So, I mean, again, I don't really understand how that works in an area like California necessarily, but it does seem like it would make some sense, seeing that there are parts of the world where, they're having these, incredible, tornadoes, like, and storms, like every few months, it feels
hurricanes.
Like sometimes. And hurricane season seems to be extended quite a bit of time now.
It's like year round now.
It's crazy. Season.
I'm hoping Dr. Earle will come back on because I do want him to talk about the relation of the wildfires and COVID as it's related to climate change all over the place. And, we don't think of COVID and the pandemic being related to climate change, but he makes a really amazing correlation and it makes a lot of sense. So I'm hoping he's able to log back on so we can get that. But, I wanted to also talk to him about the economics of it, and who's making money off of the lack
who's
of
benefiting.
prevention. Why are we going about it this way? Because the people that make money, they're going to do whatever they need to do to keep making money. So if it's not making money for them to prevent it, then who is making money on the loss of all of this property and in some cases lives, So those are some questions that I had for Dr. Earle, and I'm really crossing my fingers that he'll be able to get back on. But it's been an incredible opportunity already to speak with him and a lot of insight. And I appreciate you coming on too, Danny. Even though it's been like a tech problem today, he is way up in the mountains in a pretty rural area. Hold on, trying to connect again. And I'm hoping that he will be able to. What were my questions? Who's making the money? We'll let you ask that one, Danny, and then I'll see if he can follow up with COVID, because I think that's like the most, important factor. Who is making the money off of this?
Who is benefiting from these fires?
Yeah,
and it seems like there might be a challenge to really break that down. Just seeing that, I mean, realistically, in the way that we're doing it now, it's very put a Band-Aid on it. Mm-hmm. But if there is a way to maybe pay for the elbow guards, the knee guards, the shin guards, the helmet, it's going to cost money to do that. But at the same time, it might be better off than, the emergency bill later on down the line. Yeah, so I would like to know in both sides of that who benefits.
Yeah. Well, he's back on. Thank God. Dr. Earle, can you hear us?
Dr. Earle.
Let us know when you can hear us, Dr. Earle. Yeah, I think that's going to be really telling. And the fact that he's both an economics professor and a cultural anthropologist, he follows the money, like he said in the beginning of this episode. So, Dr. Earle, can you hear us?
He's going to log off. I can feel it, and he'll log back on. It'll be perfect.
It's true. It's true. It's such an important conversation, and I appreciate all of you guys who have been tuned in. I am going to cut this up a little bit because there's been some great bites, and that way it can be a little bit easier to watch. But we're just going to run through it live like this, raw, as we do during times of COVID, because what else can you do? You got to go with the flow and roll with the punches. Yeah, I know that you have been really on top of being a conservationist, Danny. So I appreciate you coming on board. I know this is an important concept for you and really for all of us in California. We talked earlier about how, these are man-made fires for the most part, being exacerbated by climate change. And, the really bad Paradise Fire was started by PG&E. I forget what the name of the fire that was started by the gender reveal party, which those people need to be held responsible. Honestly, it's pretty ridiculous.
Again, it's the second time it's happened in California that it started a wildfire. So like at some point, these people need to pay the price for this. I mean,
yeah,
like
it goes without
saying.
Absolutely. First of all, I think all gender reveal parties should be banned. Like, what is the purpose?
Same.
Really? Like, how many parties do you need? You need the gender reveal, and then you need the shower, and then you need the party, and then maybe it's because I don't have any kids, but I just think it's overly celebrated. Like, maybe have a little gender reveal with you and your intimate partner and the baby daddy, and you could just like
make it a family thing. Like, tell your parents or something. We don't need a whole party for it. And like, I'm here for two things. I'm here for a sip and see, which is once the baby arrives, everyone comes look at the baby, and you have champagne and wine and
a sip
make
and
that
see.
A party. It's very Southern, but I believe in that. And I also believe in gender conceal parties where we just burn our birth certificates. No?
Oh.
No? No one will know.
I would go with that. I mean, I think more and more people should do a gender conceal. I think it's more exciting when you're giving birth to not know what it's going to be. Yeah. And also we're getting away from, your standard like gender norms of pink and blue. You can just go with whatever. A lot of boys are wearing pink these days. I'm not sure we're going to get Dr. Earle back. He did try to log in. We almost had him. And
we're right at 12 too.
I know. And I do need to get going soon because I have some other work to do today, but here he comes.
Here he is. Yay.
We might be able to finish strong. Dr. Earle, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yay! Oh, you're back. Well, we have two big questions for you. I'll let Danny start off. And then, we got to start wrapping up because we both got to go to work, Dr. Earle. But go ahead. Go ahead, Danny.
Yeah. So Dr. Earle, we were just talking about, there it is. No? Okay.
He's here.
We spoke earlier about, allocating funds towards the fires in terms of like, prevention, and then also when there is a fire, where the money goes. But really, who's benefiting from these fires? Who are the companies or the individuals or, groups of people that benefit from fires?
Benefit from fires.
Or benefit from the lack of prevention.
Or the lack of prevention.
Think of any.
Wow.
So it's really a loss to everyone when we don't engage in like a fire prevention strategy.
It's great if you're a firefighter and the whole industry around that. Although I have to say, California is not really very well invested in equipment. We don't own our own super tanker, for example. Why not? Why do we have to rent one from Colorado? There should be a full-time plane ready at the waiting. But regardless of that, the fact of the matter is that what people don't have the ability set up, I'm not pointing a finger at any individual or any even group, is that firefighting always sucks all the money out of fire prevention. Whether we look at the Forest Service budget, which had the Congress budget them a specific bunch of money for prevention, and then most of that money got sucked out of there because there's a hole in that budget that goes into emergencies, right? So emergencies kind of steal everything away from the prevention side of things. In the same way that we tend to focus in our healthcare system once people get ill rather than seeking to prevent, right? Yeah. And this is where there's an analogy with the COVID problem, that we really have not been able to focus ourselves consistently and in a disciplined way on the prevention side, because prevention is uncomfortable. It's inconvenient.
It's boring.
Gets in the way. It's boring, exactly. So is cleaning up dead branches off your yard. It's boring, uncomfortable, and for people who have health issues who are elderly, it's even more of a chore, or in case of COVID, more of a risk.
Yeah.
So it's a fundamental cultural problem. I'm a cultural anthropologist by training. It's a cultural problem in my culture that we do not focus preventively. We focus too much on the cure. Think of PG&E. Its policy right up to now has been don't fix it till it's broke, right? That's the policy. Burn down Paradise. Don't fix it till it's broke. Rather than going and inspecting all of those towers, and if there's something old in them, replacing them, making sure that the roads that go up to those towers are good enough to get a fire truck up, the new fire trucks that are bigger than the old fire trucks. None of that stuff has been done. None of that very boring infrastructural stuff. If I drive down my street to go to the town, the most dangerous places in the whole town are the roads, because the trees are this far away from the roads.
Wow.
Now, back in where I grew up, there's a law, you have to have 15 feet of clear on either side of a road, which would be a really good law here, because if you can't get out, you can't save yourself from a fire.
Yeah.
Right?
And we've all seen those videos of people
clearing
driving
roads around here. That's not safe. Driving
Yeah.
and burning up, right? Because the fire right there. Why is it not the state's responsibility to clear large spaces to either side of those roads so that people could get trapped? It's really that simple to change mentality away from the battle to preventing the war.
Yeah, I want to touch back a little bit, Dr. Earle, on you mentioning COVID, because we had spoken before about climate change and how COVID itself and the pandemic is related in part to wildfires and other natural disasters. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, it is, in the sense that there are in the wild what we call reservoirs of viruses. And the principal reservoir that we've identified so far, and let's face it, we have not studied many parts of this natural world, and some of which are disappearing on us before we've even studied them. But we know that bats are a reservoir in Africa and in Asia. And it's pretty clear that this particular virus comes from a group of viruses that hang out in reservoirs of bats. But as humans expand our development of wild lands, as more of what was nature is now culture, is now occupied by humans, more of the natural habitat is disturbed. And when these bat habitats get disturbed, and worse in many societies like the Chinese, where there's a premium put on the meats and parts, the organs of wild animals, both for food and for medicine, then you're bringing wild animals that are a vector of vast numbers of viral diseases right into contact with domestic animals and with humans. These are called wet markets. The wet market in Wuhan is open right now. Despite that is the source of this particular pandemic, and maybe dozens more in the future. So again, we're not thinking preventively. We should have in the United Nations a big discussion about how to get rid of wet markets all around the world. Right.
But some would argue then that that's some sort of a cultural bias, that these cultures do rely on their wet markets and they rely on these medicines.
We don't have an extra planet. If we had an extra planet, then that would be fine. But it's one small planet and we all live on it. That's why Buckminster Fuller called it Spaceship Earth. imagine in Spaceship Earth, somebody coming in, well, it's my culture that I can just spit into the air in a spaceship. So everyone gets to watch the clam float around. No, we are going to have to modify everything we do. Every culture, every society, everywhere in the world is going to have to change some of their behavior because we're all in this small lifeboat together. And if we don't change and take care of it, it will kill us.
Yeah.
Right?
Especially when these are multiple groups of things that aren't naturally found in nature. You're creating different types of bacteria that naturally, the way that the earth is, would never be together, like reptiles and fish. Like, I mean, unless you're in Florida or something, that's not typically something that would be together. And then you're putting it in a small environment.
Setting where tons of wild animals from diverse locations together with domestic animals and humans. Right. Most of the great plagues have come via animals. You know,
well, in the movie Outbreak, they were falling trees.
Bird flu, you know, these are wild animals.
Mad cow disease.
Yes, they come into domestic animals and then they pass them to humans. Well, we're not going to get rid of domestic animals, probably not anytime soon. Although I really would love to see a little retirement of some of the cows because they're great producers of greenhouse gas and methane. But the one thing we could do right now about pandemics preventively is to pressure every country in the world, especially ones like China, ones in Africa, in South Asia, to prohibit wet markets. Even if they just segregated wild animals on one side of town and the domestic ones on the other side of town would be better than the way it is now. But ideally, we shouldn't be trafficking in wild animals, just for cultural reasons or any other reasons right now. They're already in enough danger and they already present us with enough danger that it's just not worth trafficking in. And
so how does deforestation how does deforestation play into that as well? I mean, not to quote a Hollywood film, but in the beginning of Outbreak, they're felling trees, the bats fly out, somebody gets bit. So you're displacing these wild animals as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's a metaphor for our excessive use of and destruction of natural habitat when we could be doubling down on using the habitat we've already whacked, like the habitat of this part of California, right? Here's one, we don't have to worry about preserving nature here. That boat left 100 years ago. Now what we have to be doing to resist climate change and to prevent all of these poor people who have sought out inexpensive housing away from the cities, because you know how expensive it is in the cities in California. Right? They've sought someplace they could afford, even if they have to drive 2 hours to get to work, they've got someplace they can live, but they cannot afford the $10, $15, $20, $50,000 to make it really fire safe. Now, might be able to pay that over 20 years, like a mortgage on a house, especially if it came as the package. Well, here you are, sir, this is where you're gonna move in, but we have this thing that we have to do to the environment around it, and here's your payment plan.
Like an HOA or something.
Yeah, it sounds like an HOA.
Yeah, it's just we don't have any method either in the private sector or in the public sector to do this. I have my students working on projects in private sector, including a bank, by the way, that would be specifically dedicated to giving homeowners and home renters loans that to improve their environment. And since it's a social good beyond them, it's a social good for all of us that they improve their land. There would be some way in which you approach the state and say, could we take some percentages of this loan off because this loan is helping all of California?
Yeah, like maybe like after a certain amount of time, or maybe like a 5-year period where no fires.
Have you used the money for the thing you said you'd use it for? Can we come out and verify that you actually have made your part of this community less flammable? Well, that's a social good, and California should be paying for that social good in that kind of indirect way when people actually do their part. Because right now, what is the incentive for a poor person living out here in a trailer, totally piled up with firewood? What is the incentive to clear it out? Especially if the next neighbor over has got the same situation, and the next neighbor over on the other side's got the same situation. And then there's signs all over town where it says, the county of Yubo, we've done our part. How about you?
Blaming the victim again.
Yes, it's blaming the poor victim one more time.
Yeah.
And I can see why a lot of these people become very conservative politically and very resentful of the government in Sacramento, because here they are talking about, you know, how we're going to have car fuel emissions lowered for climate change concerns. And what's the biggest climate change contributor in California? Fires.
Yeah.
Right? We're chucking gazillions of metric tons of CO2 and other greenhouse gases into the sky every time we have one of these fires. And you know, if it's a fire, then the air control board will look the other way if it's like natural, even though it might have been started by PG&E or an arson. But if you try to preventatively burn, right, then you need like complicated permits from the air board. And it's really hard to actually do. It's just bass acro.
Yeah, your bureaucratic red tape. Dr. Earle, are there other countries that are fighting wildfires more successfully, something that we can model ourselves after? I mean, are they implementing some of the ideas that you've spoken about today? Oh, we might have lost him again. We got a good chunk from him though, didn't we?
We did so good. We did so good.
We were doing so good for a second. Are
We
you
got
still
about
there,
15
Dr. Earle? Oh, I want to give him another chance. But he did cover a lot of the things that we wanted to talk about, especially in how climate change is affecting COVID. And, you know, I really am surprised that a cultural anthropologist would say what he did about wet markets, because from what I understand about cultural anthropology, it's kind of like respect the culture as is, don't judge their tactics. But he's saying, hey, we're all in this together, and you can't just pick and choose if it's really ruining the whole planet. I mean, everybody's lives are at risk because you want to insist on having these wet markets. And he even came up with a good solution of just separating those two, spaces with the wild animals and the domestic animals. Oh, we got you back.
Yeah, I was just going to say that it's when Governor Newsom stands in front of a fire and says this is climate change, he's not wrong. Climate change has kind of weaponized or catalyzed all of these other problems. But it sounds to rural people like he's saying, so we don't really have any responsibility because, you know, or responsibility is to have a lower fuel, better used cars and things like that, all of which are great, but they don't address this problem.
Yeah,
right?
Which is more pressing. Yeah.
Which is more pressing. Look, look what we have done because of the numbers of people dying from COVID. We've shut down whole societies. We've
taken drastic steps.
People have lost a lot through COVID.
We completely altered things in our lives because we don't want to have to die in fire before we take modes of it. You know, is 100 a good number or 1,000?
Right. Yeah. Where do we stop?
What's the number where we start behaving with fire the way we're already behaving with COVID?
Yeah. Dr. Earle, we have an election coming up. What is some advice in regards to people who are watching on how our vote can maybe change some of this? Who should we be talking to? Should we be talking to Newsom here in California?
Well,
other state leaders?
Yeah, I mean, if we have a change at the federal level, I think that we are in a position to be able to talk with people in agriculture to start getting money to the Forest Service, because that's just a crazy situation right now. We need to have more federal funding that is associated with forest management, just the BLM, all of the different entities that have responsibility, the Park Service, all of these. But to me, you know, the state, it's very important to vote. But at the state after the election of saying, okay, we've supported the you know, the supposedly more progressive party here. So let it, and you've addressed in many ways the urban half of the poverty equation.
Right.
Now let's have a little conversation about the rural half.
Right.
The part that isn't quite so much your constituency, but it doesn't matter that they're not your constituency. You need to help them.
Yeah.
And if the Democrats in California would demonstrate that they're willing to help rural California.
Yeah. That explains why we have a lot of Republicans in these rural communities, and he's absolutely right. And a lot of times I see what Governor Newsom doing. Go ahead, Dr. Earle.
Yeah, I was going to say, we have to remember, just because the money and the power is in the urban areas, you know, voting is everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, and it's up to the more progressive political party to say, yes, we are inclusive, right?
Yeah.
And it's great how we're inclusive of minorities in cities, and we applaud that. But what about the poor who are out in the woods?
Yeah, the
And
vulnerable.
It's crazy. And
It's,
it's actually kind of interesting because, I mean, we did see the fires even still affect areas that we would consider the liberal, the elite areas.
Yeah,
I mean,
yes,
especially with
the
the fires that we saw on the coast. And even I grew up in a city called Rancho Cucamonga, and it was very common that they would engage in like practices of burning the land every, you know, I would say not even every year. I would say every year, a couple years or so.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, that's a sleeper town where people live and work in Los Angeles a lot of times. And so, I mean, it's really any of the outskirts of these cities that we're talking about. So I feel like there still would be a good chance for people who are involved in like a more urban lifestyle could still benefit from
Absolutely.
this.
Yeah.
Oh,
God, Dr. Earle froze up.
I mean,
there he goes.
I can't tell you how much I had when I saw this. Right, mixed fields of smoke in San Francisco.
Right.
Because on one hand, any other sort of health related thing, but guess what? The forest is getting rubbed in your urban face.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right.
And I would like to see. Go ahead.
Especially, I was saying, especially here in California too, where like you can drive 30 minutes and be in the, you know, in the mountains. So it really does affect us all, even in the city life. If you want to continue your runs, you know, in Runyon,
or the Los Angeles National Forest, you know. Well, I was going to say, you know, this is indicative, Dr. Earle, of how politics is actually exacerbating the situation, because even though we have a supposed progressive in Newsom here as a governor, you know, him passing that there's going to be, you know, no gasoline cars in 2034 or whatever it's going to be, it's really just lip service, because we have things that are pressing today that we can do to actually combat climate change and combat these kinds of things. I really appreciate your insight today.
Yeah, and that is, it's the same message that I say to my students about our entire planet. You know, we cannot be partial California. We have,
I think he froze up again. There it goes.
We have to be, we can't be partial United States, partly global citizens. We have to be citizens of all of the globe. It's an awesome, terrifying responsibility. And I don't see any, what else is there? You know, that really, it's sort of like being in a space and saying, oh no, I'm leaving. Leaving for where? You know,
oblivion.
All in this, and we have to learn. We all have to live here together. And when some of the poorest are dying in their homes due to fires that could have been prevented, we all die a little. You know, what did Jesus say? He said, where's the food for the least of these?
Yeah.
You know, how do we judge our society? By what the best people are doing, what the richest people are doing, or how we treat our poorest?
Yeah.
You know, and we're aware of it with the homeless, because the homeless are going to rub our faces in it if we go outdoors, right? But these people are never going to rub faces in it. It's only when the ash reaches from there to here that you know that not only are you breathing some of the forest, but you're breathing some of the trailers, some of the pickup trucks, and some of the people.
Some of the people. Wow, what a powerful statement.
Is, next time you smell that smoke, remember there's people in there.
Wow, Dr. Earle, thank you so much. We run out of time, but I just can't thank you enough. Thank you for working with these technical difficulties as well. I appreciate your patience. And Danny, thank you so much for your insight as well. Any last words, Dr. Earle, where people can connect with you?
Well, anthropological concept.
We lost him again.
Oh no.
Oh no. We couldn't hear you, Dr. Earle. Can you hear us now? No, we might have lost him, but we got a good ending out of it. I appreciate it, Danny. I'm gonna log off and then Dr. Earle, can you hear us? We lost you again.
We're just signing off.
We're signing off. We better say goodbye.
Okay. Just remember.
Thank you so much. Yes.
Just remember. I was just going to say, just remember, if you want to understand the rest of the world, walk. Can you hear me?
No, we couldn't hear.
As I was saying, I learned this because I'm out here. I walked a mile in the moccasins. So I always say to people, you want to really understand the situation, go walk a mile in the moccasins of the people most affected.
Wow.
Right? Then you will see it from their perspective, right?
Yeah.
And you don't have to agree with their perspective. You have to sympathize with it because they're the ones dying.
That's true.
And losing all their possessions.
Yeah, it's a rough time.
Last week or 2 weeks ago, I had to just look and say, what am I going to take and what am I going to leave in a fire?
It's amazing. I'm glad you're
in that situation.
I'm so glad you're okay. And I really appreciate you taking the time with us. I know it's still craziness and they're even shutting off electricity now as we speak to you. So thank you for sharing this with us. Stay safe. And hopefully we can get the word out about how simple the simple things we can do to try to prevent these natural disasters.
Yep.
Oh, wait, man-made disasters.
Man-made disasters. There's nothing natural about that. Nothing natural about it.
Thank you
again, Dr. Earle. It's been great.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Have a good day.
You too. Bye.